An unusual show about life lessons. First up, former Congressman Anthony Weiner, then Hazel Dukes, a woman who has devoted much of her 91 years to civil rights activism. The Point starts right now. He is now the host of The Middle with Anthony Weiner on conservative talk radio. He was never a conservative, but he's certainly the man in the middle as listeners call in and discuss and challenge his views. Now, I listened to your 100th show, and I was actually stunned by the fact that you had to deal with all of these people who call in and basically are very strong Trump supporters, and you have to fend them off. What is that like for you, a diehard liberal?
Well, these people are our neighbors, and I guess it comes down to this often discussed idea that, you know, we're in silos. We're in silos politically, but we're also in silos about the way we get our news. Most Americans are not like your viewers who kind of want a little bit of everything. A lot of people now watch MSNBC to get the left perspective, and they listen to conservative radio or Fox News to get the right perspective. And I think that part of the problem is that neither the left or the right really hears the other side because they sometimes choose not to. And the environment I'm doing on WABC radio is everyone gets a little something. The left gets to hear what these people are saying about things that we take for granted, perhaps. But the right also gets a little bit of pushback from me. But we call the show The Middle because at the end of the day, the facts are neither left nor right. And that very often the conversation veers away from those facts. I try to bring it back. It's a great challenge, and I really do enjoy it. But it's not dissimilar. You know, you've covered me for so long. The district that I represented in Brooklyn and Queens was Democratic, but frankly, when I left, it became a Republican seat because there's a lot of people very much in the middle politically and very much people who have a mixed bag of things. They can be very pro-Israel, very Zionist, very anti-crime, but also progressive on things like a woman's right to choose and things like that. So it's a very familiar footing for me to be on.
So let's talk about Congress because you have a lot of experience in it. And, you know, interestingly enough, the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, in New York this past week said all roads to controlling the House go through New York. So my question to you is this. I mean, you're a smart political person. You've been able to look at the landscape. Do you think that the Democrats have a chance of flipping those Republican seats that in New York that went Republican because of the red wave 2 years ago?
So everything that we've seen ever since Donald Trump came down that escalator has been that Democrats have done very, very well. We just had a special election in New York 3 where Democrats exceeded expectations all across the country. There have been referenda on things like choice, off-year elections. Democrats have done very well.
Except that Trump is going to be on the ballot this time.
Right. Well, Trump has nominally been on the ballot every year.
But now he's really on the ballot, and his people will come out to vote for him.
Right. In 2020, he got swamped. In 2020, Democrats gained seats. In 2018, when people were upset about him getting elected, Democrats swept in 2018. 2022,
not so good.
2022, the red wave around the country was basically a trickle. Now, New York, I think the reason why Speaker Johnson might have said that is that New York was the exception that proved the rule.
Right.
But I am fairly confident that we kind of, when we get to presidential elections, you know, for the most part, the American people have rejected Donald Trump repeatedly.
So you're saying that the 5 or 6 Republicans who won last time are an endangered species come November?
Well, if you look at what happened in New York 3, and you are a Republican that got elected just a year and a half, 2 years ago.
But he did it by going to the right of the president on immigration.
Well, but I'm telling you that this was a test case. If you couldn't hold that seat, and you didn't even come that close, if I'm talking about like the Republicans now, I see no reason to believe that you shouldn't be nervous if you're a Republican that squeaked in. We have Republicans that won Biden districts where Biden won. Now, is that going to happen again in a year that Biden's at the top of the ticket? I'm dubious. Look, I don't think it's going to be easy, but I think the Democrats are on a path to take the House. The Senate, obviously, the map is very difficult, but I think the House will win.
But here's the question. Given the fact that a lot of Democrats raise issues about President Biden and his fitness for office, could they decide to stay home and then affect the elections here in New York?
We've got no evidence that that happens. We've got no the single greatest animating force in the Democratic Party since 2015 has been Donald Trump. Donald Trump has created enormous turnout waves for Democrats every election since, every single one. And let's recall, he did not win the popular vote in 2016. Again, just to go back, 2018, historic gains by the Democrats in response to Donald Trump. The more Donald Trump is the candidate, the better Democrats do.
Even in Long Island, which has some very, very, very red areas?
I'm sure very, very red areas anywhere in the country are going to go with Trump. We don't need to win everywhere.
No, but what I'm saying is, if given the fact that they're saying that if they need to take these 5 or 6 Republican seats and flip them, is there a possibility that they're going to be able to do that to take control of the House?
Look, I think the Democrats have to hold serve in places that Joe Biden, if you're a Republican that won in a Biden district, meaning that Biden won it during the presidential, you're an endangered species right now. Look, we are at a point now because of gerrymandering around the country, because of computer-generated ways that we draw districts, because of incumbent protection things that on both sides, that there are fewer and fewer truly flippable seats. The number of seats in the middle, but in those seats, Democrats have been doing very well. And when we have toss-up elections, like the one we just had in New York 3 was a point or two, we thought, it turned out to be 8. That's a very good sign for Democrats.
So let's talk about redistricting, because you raised the issue, and the maps have just been slightly redrawn by the Independent Redistricting Commission. The legislature next week has to decide whether to approve those districts. Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, is making waves like he didn't like them. Do you foresee a time when the legislature will redraw the maps to make the seats more amenable to Democrats?
Well, I would hope so. Look,
But that's going to be a court. Then the Republicans will go to court.
Well, the districting all around the country goes to courts. That winds up happening. But look, I like the idea of independent districting. I like the idea of everyone runs in a square district, that we don't take politics into account. That's not the world we live in. And if Texas is going to gerrymander and Florida is going to gerrymander to benefit Republicans, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. What happens this time around? Look, I mean, I think there are a handful of seats that you can probably make some changes to, but I think that one of the mistakes the Democrats made last time is they were pigs. They tried to draw districts to carve Staten Island into 4 different districts and things like that. I think that's a mistake. But as far as the one thing that members of Congress know better than anyone else is their own districts. And so if Hakeem Jeffries thinks that we can make some changes to the districts to increase the Democrats by 1 or 2, it's not a perfect world, but I'm in favor of it.
What role will immigration play in this election?
I think it's a winner for Democrats.
How do you say that?
Well, first of all, you turn to me to say unusual things, right? That's one of the things.
I count on it.
So, you know, for the longest time, we have seen a narrative in this country. Immigration is a great issue for Republicans, but Democrats are the ones that the American people turn to solve problems. We've gone through this period of the last year and a half of the Republicans just saying it's a problem, it's a problem, it's a problem, it's a problem. But we got to see something in the last couple of months of the Democrats, led by Joe Biden, saying, okay, let's sit down and solve the problem. Let's sit down and do.
And they said no.
And they walked away because, and I've said this on the radio a ton of times, which is the Republicans are not problem solvers. That's not what they do. They're not legislators. And just the way it fell apart under Bush, it fell apart under Obama, and it fell apart now, it's because Republicans get up and walk away. Let me just finish my thought. So I think that in elections like this, Americans are going to reward the problem solvers, not the people that just yell about it. And you look at New York 3. Look at the area around Creedmoor. Around Creedmoor, where migrants were actually being housed, protests were going on. We won that area by twice as much as we won it last time because American people are smart. They see that one party's trying to solve these problems.
So President Biden's saying he's going to use an executive order to change things. Is that going to work?
He's basically calling that, look, the problem we have right now is the asylum laws. If we're going to solve this problem, the asylum laws have to be changed legislatively. Donald Trump tried to do it by executive action, and the court struck it down. If Joe Biden wants to, I think Joe Biden's trying to prove the point. He's trying to say, I told you we need legislation. I'm going to try to do this by executive order. You're going to see the courts are going to strike it down.
So then what happens is that Trump comes back in and says, you see, you tried to do it, you couldn't do it, elect me.
Well, Donald Trump is in no position to be saying anything. Right now, all he's doing is saying, don't solve the problem. I don't think that resonates. Remember the voters that have to be talked to. it's not these people that are voting for Donald Trump at all costs, these 30% of the country that will follow him even if he's in prison. And they're not the 40% or so that say they're going to vote for Joe Biden under any circumstance. It's people who are looking for problem solvers. And I ask you, Marcia, does Donald Trump sound like someone who's trying to come up with a solution? They appoint a very conservative Republican to solve the problems, to negotiate for them. The Democrats give them, frankly, I think too much, but give them everything they asked for, and still they said no. I don't think voters reward you for doing that kind of thing.
But the problem is, if this doesn't work and President Biden's solution doesn't work, then he's going to point fingers, and we have about 30 seconds left.
The fact is, you need legislators to pass laws, legislators to allocate money. If that doesn't happen, that's a reason to throw out the legislators.
Okay, well, we're going to wait and see what happens, but right now we're going to have to leave it right there. But our conversation continues right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York.